Hello, everybody. Welcome to our trending segment. Our guest is in the midst of a 17-year pro career. He's got 32 top 10 finishes, 4 professional tour wins. He won the Bassmaster Classic in 2006. I was his official observer in that event. I don't know if you remember that or not, but that was a lot of fun for me. He also won the Forest Wood Cup Championship in 2004. He's earned $2.5 million in his career. Currently, he's competing in the Major League Fishing Tour. Welcome to the show, Luke Clausen.
Thanks for having me, Keith.
You know, Luke, that was my first experience with locks. I'd never been through a lock before. That was pretty amazing there in 2006.
Yeah, that's one of the smallest locks you'll find in the country, too. There's a couple places that are smaller, but Harris changed the places we go through locks, especially out west here, are 100-foot swings where that's about 4 foot there and holds 15 or 20 boats.
That's yeah, it's pretty humbling experience to be in that when you're not used to doing it. I don't know. I couldn't believe all the bass fishing royalty that was in that little boxed in area right there while we were waiting for it to go up and down. That was pretty cool. Not, it was also pretty cool to watch you operate that day. So today we're looking at what does it take to be a professional bass angler. Somebody once asked Ray Scott, the founder of BASS, what does it take to be a professional angler? And Scott responded by saying, having enough money to pay the next entry fee. And I've always thought that was kind of funny and kind of appropriate for what I know about tournament bass fishing. You've been at this for 17 years. What do you attribute to your ability to stay in this game for so long?
You know, Keith, there is some truth to that, but it's also the way you get those dollars to get the next entry fee has always been the question. And a lot of people always ask me, how do I get sponsors so I can fish? And that's a question nobody wants to hear the answer I have to give them. And the reality is you get sponsors because you've caught fish and been successful. Leading up to that point, it's a hard road. I slept in my truck. I remember I'd eat one Taco Bell soft taco for dinner at night because they were 79 cents at the time, and sleep in the back of my truck and do it again the next day, saving every penny, and kept working my way up to the next level, winning tournaments and saving as much money as you could and working your tail off doing it. You know, so there is some truth to that. You need to have the dollars to be able to keep signing up for more tournaments and having more opportunities to win. But on the other hand, those dollars don't come the way people think they do. A lot of young anglers believe that you get sponsors and have the ability to fish. And fortunately or unfortunately, it doesn't work that way for the most part. There are a few rare occasions that people have a relationship that turns into something where they're bankrolled to go fish for a certain amount of time. But for the most part, most of the anglers that I fish against have led a path that's been, there's been near starvation at times, or the feeling of, and some empty bank accounts, a whole lot of hard work and a lot of hours on the water, and you know, having a couple tournaments that you have some success, some big victories, and you end up getting sponsors because of that, because you develop a name for yourself, have some notoriety, and now it's social media following, along with a lot of other sources of media that you can actually promote the sponsor effectively.
Yeah, you know, it's always struck me. It kind of seems like actually catching fish is maybe our favorite part of the deal, but it's probably one of the smallest aspects of what you actually do, right? Talk about some of the jobs that are associated with these sponsors you're talking about.
Well, it is a small part of it once you're established and as a professional angler, but somebody that's, again, at a AAA level or just starting out, generally they don't have a lot of the responsibilities of sponsors. They spend a lot more time on the water than somebody like myself that's been doing it for a long time. I have a lot of sponsor relationships and obligations that I have to fulfill, to where, you know, flying around the country for appearances or team meetings or visiting dealers, whatever that sponsor needs, wants, desires. Yeah, I have obligations and contracts that I spend a lot of time doing that. Fishing's still a part of it. You have to stay relevant. Winning's probably not as big as it used to be, just because we have so many more events now. When I first started fishing, there was literally 8 big events a year. And now we're looking at, it feels like there's 8 a month. So you win a tournament's forgotten a lot quicker. But once you're established, a lot of my, I guess, my worth, for lack of a better term, my work to a lot of these sponsors is what I do on the side in promotion. You know, we spent yesterday 12 hours on the water yesterday, filming, shooting video, creating content for sponsors. You know, the last month, I think I've flown to 5 or 6 different cities, flying for whether it's photo shoots, team meetings, you know, just different stuff like that, that we try to get a lot of this knocked out in the fall because tournaments get busy in the spring.
I talk about appearances. I mean, how many appearances do you typically make a year outside of fishing tournaments?
It really depends on the year. This year, of course, has been slimmed down for everybody due to what's going on with the pandemic and whatnot. Some years it's a lot more, some years it's less, and it kind of depends on what you call an appearance. So we'll have the team meetings a lot of times where all the pro staff gets together, or have some prototype projects, maybe working on a trolling motor or hull designs or bait development, doing those kind of things that we'll fly around for. But also, I may go meet for Bridgeford Foods, which is my title sponsor, I may go meet a key salesperson of theirs, take them fishing for a day, or just go meet with them. So there's, I guess, a different dynamic than there was before. Appearances used to be, we had all these shows, trade shows, boat shows, that kind of stuff, doing seminars. And now I find myself a lot more time spent traveling around doing stuff that's more specific to that individual product that sponsor is looking for.
Well, I'm really liking what we're hearing here in terms of what it takes to be a professional. There's a lot of boardroom stuff that you have to do. There's a lot of corporate meetings that you have to attend. That's a pretty interesting thing. I don't think a lot of people ever associate that with guys going out there and fishing tournament trails. You mentioned your boat is wrapped with the Bridgeford Foods logo. They are not a fishing related company. I can remember back in the day when some of the quote unquote non-endemics started coming into fishing, kind of like with NASCAR. How does an angler convince a company that's outside the fishing industry that they need to be involved in tournament fishing?
Well, it is a little bit difficult because in the long run, trying to show exactly how product you sold due to brand awareness, your promotional activities, whatever it may be, is pretty challenging. So you're putting your most effort you can forward, and you see it's easy to show them how many viewers see what you're doing for promotions, how many impressions you have, whether it's driving or video or social media or podcasts, whatever it may be. But with the case of Bridgeford Foods, I was just really lucky that Al Bridgeford liked to bass fish. He was at an event. I met him a couple years previous to working with him, and at the time I'd been with Chevy for almost 10 years, I guess. I had some friends in Detroit and told me that it was coming down the pipe. They were going to cut a lot of their outdoor objective, and that initiative was going to be limited to a very small group, and we're likely to be one of the ones that were going to be cut, the Chevy Pro Fishing Team. So at that time, I called Al and had the discussion with him, like, what can I do for you, and what's the value? With every sponsor, whether it's an endemic or non-endemic, it's very important to have that sponsor feel like they got good value out of what they paid you, and you got good value out of what you were getting paid for the amount of effort you put in. It's always a short-term relationship. If they walk away saying, man, we didn't really get much out of our money, or you're saying, man, I did a lot and didn't get much out of it, because neither of you is happy. And down the road, it doesn't work out into a long-term relationship. And I got to say, when I was younger, there was a lot of relationships that I saw as being for that year. And now looking back, some of the companies that I've worked at for a lot of years, like Z-Man or Bridgeford, those are some of the best relationships I have. I don't see them going anywhere. Great companies. I think I have a lot more of a emotional tie to them. I put more effort in than when you're just thinking about the dollar for that year, and become great friends of yours, and really make my job a lot more enjoyable working with people over the long term, because you get to know each other so well.
So like, I mean, obviously you're probably not doing seminars for Bridgeford Foods, but what kind of stuff do you do with them? I mean, you talked about meeting with salespeople and so on, but like, what kind of stuff?
Yeah, I mean, like I said, meeting with salespeople is one small element. We're also doing photos for the buyers in front of the store so they can use that for promotional activity. But the bigger buyers are really the influencers in a retail industry like that. So, for example, there was a buyer from a major chain out west here. Took him out saltwater fishing a couple of years ago. We ended up landing the account, and it was I'm trying to remember how many stores. It was in the 20 stores that we had placement in for a major retail chain out here. And now that's growing into over 100 stores in the past couple of years. So little things like that. We have some attempts that don't turn out into being huge sales numbers. That one turned into being a really big deal. But throughout the course of the year, that's a lot of what we do on the business side of it for them. And along with that, we're still doing the stuff for their website, Bridgeford Pro Tips. Of course, the impressions that we receive from vehicles and on our social media accounts.
I think the thing that kind of boils down to, Luke, is that there are people that fish and love fishing in every aspect of life, and it's some of these companies have kind of dialed in and realized that there's a lot of people that fish that are involved in the corporate world, and it just makes good sense to be involved, right?
It does, and it's really a cheap buy for a bigger company. I mean, what they spend on, excuse me, excuse me, what they spend on, I'm sorry. So yeah, it really is a good buy for them, a good value for them, and a good fit for them. They don't spend nearly as much money on a professional angler as they would on a television ad or some of these bigger buys. Working with Chevrolet, I realize the amount of money that's in marketing for a mega company. A company of that size, they're spending millions and millions of dollars day in and day out. And so to spend a little bit of money on a professional angler, really the payback there is exponentially larger just for the amount of money they spend. They get a pretty big following, a lot of brand awareness, and there's a lot of association tied to it that people like to fish. They know that Bridgeford supports fishing and sports fishermen. When they go to a store, they're going to pick Bridgeford products.
Absolutely, absolutely. I mean, I think that's an excellent point you make. We're talking to Luke Clausen. He's a Bassmaster Classic champion. He's a Forest Wood Cup champion. He's a 17-year pro career, and we're talking about what it takes to be a professional angler. Now, it's interesting, Luke. We think about 17 years that you've been in this game, and obviously your fishing has had to evolve over this time. What would you say has been the biggest part of your fishing that has changed over the last 17 years?
Every time you say 17 years, it makes me feel old. Yeah, it continuously evolves. I think back the first year I started fishing the Bass Pro Top 150s, we didn't have GPS until like the second or third term of the year I got it. And I think it was the second year I fished. We were at Lake Okeechobee. GPSs were pretty new to us, and there was a satellite that launched. We had no idea where we were. There was about 10 of us doing circles in the middle of the lake. Now everybody has GPS. Yeah, it's just an evolution of technology between electronics, boats, motors, equipment even. G. Loomis is a company I've been with for a long time. It's amazing to see the progression of how much better our rods and componentry is in the reels with Shimano from where they were back then. So we're seeing progressions like that. And then techniques evolved too. The chatterbait was not around when I started. The Senko wasn't around when I started.
Right.
There's a lot of stuff that I look back and it seems pretty novel now that I had no idea about when I started. And our fishing approach was very simplified compared to what it is now and the amount of tackle we carried. And, it continues to go that. We're seeing this forward-facing sonars now. Power poles were not that long ago, it seems like to me, even though I think they came out in 2005 maybe, is the first year I had them anyway. It doesn't seem like that long ago, but now everybody has them. It's kind of like you're always trying to get the next advantage, but still goes back to a lot of fun in the fish.
I was going to say, I think the evolution of electronics has been a mind blowing thing. I was away from fishing for a few short years, not many, a few short years, and all of a sudden I come back and we've got, live 3D. You can see, 360 degrees. You can see everything. You can cast a fish and make them. I'm watching anglers fish, and they're looking straight down at their deck and not out where they just threw their bait. It's just an amazing thing to see how electronics have changed.
Yeah, there's always something new that comes to the sport, and it changes everything. When the chatterbait came out, it was really like a bait that came out, and now we're seeing this forward-facing sonar, and people literally seeing their bait, fish bite their bait 20 or 30 feet from their boat or further. We see it with side imaging when it came out, locating isolated structure, rocks, logs, small pieces of structure out on flats that we would have no idea, no really ability to find those, prior to that. And now it's became a game that we spend a lot more time idling, looking at our electronics than we used to. I think all of us probably look down when we're walking all the time because we spend all day looking down at our graphs, regardless if you're fishing shallow or deep. There's so much technology and so much involved there that one little clue that you can see on that can separate you from the rest of the field for that hour or that day or that tournament.
Now, some anglers are noted power fishermen. For example, if we at a tournament and we see Tommy Biffle or someone like a Denny Brower up at the top, we know there's a jig or flipping bite going on somewhere in the lake. and some other anglers are maybe a little more finesse related. Aaron Martins is doing well. He's kind of been linked to a lot of finesse techniques. Where would you put Luke Clausen in that style? Are you versatile? Are you more power? Are you more finesse? What do you think?
Boy, I get asked that question a lot, and I don't know a good answer. It seems like I throw everything, and I don't know that I'm that much better at one thing than another. I think I'm probably more prone to picking up finesse stuff when other people aren't. But also, I look at tournament results and tournament histories. I probably spent more time casting and winding a bait than I have doing something like that. Really, it's kind of a jack of all trades, master of none. I would say would best describe my fishing style. I feel like I could do it all, but I don't really isolate myself to any one thing. And I think that's kind of a double-edged sword. Fishing like that, you lend yourself to consistency. That's something that I've been over my career is very consistent. Always jokingly a little above average. It seems like so many of my finishes, I'll make cuts but not win. The last 10 years has been a lot of that, and a lot of that's the style I fish. Whereas we see guys like Denny Brower that are a guy that's going to hold a black and blue jig and a flipping stick in his hand a lot of the day. He's going to have tournaments where he's second to last and he wins the next one. Those guys that really dedicate themselves to some of those power fishing techniques probably win more events, but they fail miserably at more events too.
Fair enough. Fair enough. Now, you've fished the FLW Tour, the BASS Elites. Those are best five fish kind of format events. You're currently fishing the Major League Fishing Bass Pro Tour, where every fish counts. How are those events different? I mean, there's obviously some differences, but how does it change the way you fish in a tournament in those kind of things?
More than it should be the first thing I have to say. When I first started this, I've always said in fishing, preconceived notions are your worst enemy. Like going into it with a blank slate, it's a lot easier to figure out what the fish are doing for that moment or day. And I came into Major League Fishing thinking, I'm going to be fishing. For the first year we fished it was a 1 pound minimum. And I'm thinking, I'm going to fish for smaller fish. It's really hard to target little fish, I realized. And guys that are successful still catch them on the same techniques, same baits. We've seen some exclusions from that we don't see as many full-size black and blue jigs, but there is still the majority of the fish are caught on chatterbaits, crankbaits. Now they may be flipping a creature bait instead of a big jig because it does inherently get more bites. But, like the Ned rig, I was really excited because I thought that was going to be a big player. We were at a 1 pound minimum, and it really was almost a non-factor. And then we go to 2 pounds the next year, and that really wiped the slate clean. Once you start fishing for 2 pound fish, your likelihood of catching 6 pound fish grows tremendously. And 2 pound fish eat the same baits, the same size baits as those. And the history really proves it. There have been a lot of people that have looked through our results, and there's a lot of times the guy that would have won the overall number of fish would have won the top, 5 biggest bass tournament also. There's definitely the exception to that, no question. But most of the time, I can't remember the exact number, but the vast majority of the time, the guy that would have won the overall still would have won a 5 fish tournament. So really changing the way you fish for our format, probably a pretty bad idea.
That's good insight. Really, really good insight. We're talking to Luke Clausen, former Bassmaster Classic champion, former FLW Forest Wood Cup champion, and we've been talking about a lot of different things today. So there have been a lot of events, Luke, this fall because of the cancellation of events, and a lot of anglers that I've watched and followed have commented that they've been doing a lot of junk fishing. The fall is so hard to pinpoint where fish are going to be. And so this concept of junk fishing, I've heard of it before, but I'd like to get your perspective on what you think of as junk fishing and how often you do it and how often it should play a role.
Yeah, I think like I mentioned before, I think junk fishing is how I fish. But we go back to the evolution of the sport, and it used to be so often that we saw events won with one technique, and we still see it to this day, but it's not as prevalent as it was 10 or 15 years ago. Any more guys that are winning events are evolving and changing and throwing different baits throughout the course of the day. So junk fishing is somewhat of a relative term because most of the tournaments you see won, they're not one-on-one bait any longer. Now we may go up north and a guy's catching smallmouth and they are one-on-one bait like that, one technique. But so many of these events we see, especially in the Southeast, are won with guys fishing multiple techniques. That could be considered junk fishing. 20 techniques may be junk fishing, but I think the harder fishing is, the more difficult it is to get bites, the more likely you see more techniques come into play. And that's kind of typical of the fall. Fall's not a great time to fish in the Southeast. There's just, we know that the weights aren't there that we see in the spring, and that's the reality of it. You go up north, the fall can be spectacular. Some of the Western Lakes fall can be decent, but that Southeast is a tough time of year to get bites, and really guys to be successful have to mix in a lot of different techniques.
I was thinking this. I was thinking about Lake Mead, and I know you've spent quite a bit of time on Lake Mead. I've spent some time on Lake Mead. To me, that is a lake that I've got to have 15 rods on my deck because around every corner is something different. What kind of lakes are there? Certain kinds of lakes that set themselves up for this kind of fishing, or does every lake have the potential to be a junk fishing event?
Yeah, that's a question. Really depends who you ask. For me, I think every lake has the potential for that, based on time of year. In the fall, like I said, it's just a lot more common in the fall. We're having to do a lot of things, fishing the conditions. It's kind of like Lake Mead. When you go to a place like that, that's fairly fickle, and that the water's so clear, fish are pretty educated, and there's not a large population of fish per acre, that you have to fish conditions. So if a little breeze kicks up, you may pick up a spinner bait. Or if it slicks off, you may need to pick up a drop shot or throw a top water. You're trying to fish the conditions, trying to make it happen throughout the day, trying to get 5 or 6 bites. Whereas we go to really good fisheries, you can get away with picking your technique, fighting one battle all day, and if you want to go punch grass at a Lake Seminole, something like that, you can get away with it. So really, I don't know if there's any one lake. A lot of it's timing, but lakes that are better fisheries tend to be a lot more likely to be a tournament won by a guy using one technique than a place that's really a tough fishery. And some of that's time of year, and some of the fisheries in the country, frankly, just aren't as good as others.
Maybe you could talk about what, say, 5 or 6 baits might look like if you were going to a lake and you weren't on a set pattern and you were going to have to basically fish the cover that presented itself to you. What are 5 or 6 baits that you might have on the deck of your boat?
Yeah, of course that changes some the time of the year, but universally, a bait I've made a lot of money on is a Z-Man Fatties. It's a fat finesse style worm. Put it on a shaky head on a bait caster. I throw a quarter or 3/16 ounce on a 12-pound cigar fluorocarbon and pitch it around. It just gets a lot of bites. That's something that I have on most of the year because it's a confidence bait for me, and I've caught a lot of fish on it. Another thing is a small jig. Dirty Jigs Finesse Jig is a bait that I have on the deck pretty much all the time, unless we go to a Florida or some of these unique fisheries that don't fish that way. Really don't. I mean, a jig in that style is really not that prominent. That's something that I always have on the deck. So a couple plastics like that, a couple slower baits rather, I should say. The chatterbait is one that it seems like anymore I have that every single tournament, regardless where I'm at, in some color variation, size. I have a chatterbait on the deck, and 99% of my competitors are the same way. It's rare to see a guy's boat that doesn't have a chatterbait on the deck any longer. Along with that, I think a buzz bait is another bait that once the water gets above 50, it's always a bait I pick up and throw a lot. In the last few years, I've thrown a jerkbait a lot of the year. The jackal range has been a bait that catches them from water in the 40s to in the 90s. And it seems like I have that on my deck pretty much all year anymore because it's a bait I can catch schooling fish with. I can, really search for fish with it, cover water with it. And it's a different look than a lot of fish are getting, just because even though we've seen guys like Zaldane and Hank Cherry and some of these guys that fish BASS be successful in the summer with it, it still really hasn't caught on along with a lot of the weekend anglers at a lot of these lakes. You just don't see guys doing it. It's a look a lot of the fish haven't seen. You feel like you kind of have an edge that you can get away with something like that a lot of the year, and I'm sure that'll change like most things do.
Kind of along the lines of what we were talking about earlier in terms of what a guy has to do to be a professional bass fisherman. It seems like everybody has kind of formed their own media companies and have their own YouTube channels. Luke Clausen is no different. In fact, just this morning before we came here, I was watching several things that you had on your YouTube channel, and one of the things that you had was a jerkbait presentation. And I thought it was pretty interesting the way you talked about how you fish a jerkbait in warm water as opposed to cold water. We have a lot of cold water this time of year. How would you fish that jerkbait?
Well, we're getting to the time of year you slow it down, depending on how cold it is. We were out filming yesterday, and the water was in the mid 40s. That's really more of just a pull and stop retrieve when it gets to be that cold. The colder the water, the longer you let it sit, as a general rule of thumb. But places in the south still, with that water's up in the 50s or 60s, you can get away with working a jerkbait pretty fast still. I think in that video, one thing that I always try to tell people with a jerkbait that I see an error they make all the time is work a jerkbait on a tight line. And you just kill the action of the jerkbait when you're trying to work it fast. It really doesn't matter when you're just pulling it, because that bait's literally moving and stopping. But when you want a bait to really dart side to side, you have to have slack in your line. And I see so many anglers at smaller levels that still want to fish it with a tight line, and they're really just killing the action of their jerkbait.
Well, Luke, 17 years. I know it's been that long because you were a guest on the last radio show I did, which was a long time ago. And, you know, do you see yourself going 17 more years?
That's the great thing about this sport. We see guys like Larry Nixon, Paul Elias that have
Yeah,
been idols of mine since I was a kid that are still doing it.
right.
There's really nothing that stops you from continuing to do it. I love to fish, and I love to compete as much as I love to fish. So I don't see any reason that I'm going to do anything different. And realistically, I don't know what else I would do different. This is all I've ever really known. So it's something I really enjoy and don't really have any desire to do anything different. And couldn't imagine retirement, getting into doing a show or anything that's even along the lines of the fishing industry other than competing. That's really where I want to be, what I love to do. So I don't see anything changing. Hopefully we're talking in another 17 years.
Yeah, there you go. So next season, the Major League Fishing Bass Pro Tour. Will you be doing any of the Big Fives?
No, I'm not going to be able to do those next year, mostly because I have a 3.5-year-old daughter, and there was some stints of time I'd be out of town for 7 or 8 weeks. I've qualified for the Red Crest and the heavy hitters events, and that, along with the 7 regular season events and 1 cup for next year, I'm already at 10 events. To tack another 8 on there, it's just more time than I want to be gone from my little girl and my family at this point in my life. I think 10 years ago, yeah, I definitely would have done them, but I don't think this is going to be the year for me to jump into those. Hopefully I can fish some Western events. I'd like to sneak out and fish some of the fisheries in California and out on the West Coast here that I haven't had the chance to fish for several years.
All right, Luke Clausen, thanks so much for spending the time with us today. I feel like it's good to make contact again, and we'll talk to you again real soon.
Sounds good, Keith. I really appreciate you having me and look forward to doing it again soon.
All right, take it easy now.